My hands trembled as I stared at the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines mocking everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I was carrying Alexander Chen's child, but he had already discarded me for my own sister. The contract marriage I endured for 3 years meant nothing to him when she returned from abroad. More polished and ambitious than the sister I once knew, I thought losing my husband and my sister in one brutal betrayal would break me. Instead, it led me to James Mitchell, Alexander's biggest business rival, and a man who stirred memories I couldn't explain. Every time our eyes met, every accidental touch felt like remembering something I'd forgotten long ago. The connection between us was instant and magnetic, as if we'd known each other in another lifetime. But now I faced an impossible choice. My pregnancy was showing, and Alexander would soon discover he had an heir. James stood beside me, offering protection and a love I never thought possible, while my ex-husband plotted to take everything away. What Alexander didn't know was that James and I shared more than just a growing love. We shared a past that spanned lifetimes, and this time, I refused to let anyone dictate my happiness. This is the story of how I lost everything I thought I wanted, only to find everything I truly needed. Before we begin this journey together, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as I adjusted Alexander's tie, my fingers moving with practiced precision. He stood still, barely acknowledging my presence as he scrolled through his phone. This was our routine, a carefully choreographed dance of domestic obligation that had defined our marriage for the past 3 years. The Chen Group board meeting is at 9, I reminded him, smoothing down his collar. I've arranged for your preferred breakfast to be served in the conference room. Alexander's eyes never left his screen. I know my own schedule, Victoria. Of course he did. My role as his wife was largely ceremonial, a business arrangement wrapped in a marriage certificate. The daughter of a bankrupt business partner, I had been the perfect solution to his need for a socially acceptable spouse. And his father's insistence on maintaining appearances. I stepped back, studying his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors that lined our bedroom wall. Alexander Chen was undeniably handsome, with sharp features that spoke of his mixed heritage and a physique maintained by regular sessions with an exclusive personal trainer. He looked every bit the successful 32-year-old CEO he was, and I looked every bit the trophy wife I was supposed to be. The charity gala next week, I ventured, picking up his suit jacket from the bed. Should I confirm our attendance? He finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine briefly. Do what you think is best. That's what I pay you for, isn't it? The words stung, even after all this time. I handed him his jacket, maintaining the pleasant smile that had become my armor. Of course, I'll handle everything. Once Alexander left for work, I allowed myself to sink into one of the plush chairs in our living room. The city sprawled below, a maze of skyscrapers and morning traffic that seemed as ordered and predictable as my life had become. 3 years ago, when my father's company faced bankruptcy, this arrangement had seemed like salvation. Alexander's father had approached with the proposal, marriage in exchange for settling my father's debts and ensuring his comfortable retirement. I'd agreed, partly for my father, partly because I'd harbored romantic notions about love growing from respect and shared purpose. How naive I'd been. My phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Liu, our housekeeper. She needed approval for the week's menu and had questions about the upcoming dinner party I was organizing for Alexander's business associates. This was my life now, managing our household, organizing social events, and maintaining the perfect facade of a successful young couple. I spent the morning in my home office, reviewing RSVPs for the charity gala and coordinating with event planners. The wall behind my desk displayed my credentials, a business degree from a prestigious university, now serving only to help me plan better parties. Sometimes I wondered what my professors would think if they could see me now. The afternoon brought a lunch meeting with the other wives of Alexander's business circle. We met at an exclusive restaurant where the portions were tiny and the gossip was abundant. I played my part, sharing appropriately censored stories about Alexander's latest business successes and listening to similar tales from the others. Victoria, you're so lucky, Susan, one of the younger wives, gushed. Alexander is so handsome, and you never have to worry about money. I smiled, the expression as practiced as everything else in my life, taking a small sip of water. The truth was more complicated. Yes, I lived in luxury, but the price was steep. My independence, my dreams, my chance at real love. My phone lit up with a text from my sister, Maya. She was still traveling in Europe, extending her studies indefinitely. We had been close once, before my marriage, before she decided that staying in touch with the sister who had sold herself was too uncomfortable. Her messages were rare now, usually prompted by our parents' insistence. Coming home next month, the message read. Need to talk. Something in my chest tightened. Maya had been gone for nearly 2 years, missing my wedding and every holiday since. Her return should have excited me, but instead I felt uneasy. The last time we'd spoken, she'd made her feelings about my marriage clear. "You're better than this, Vicky," she'd said. "You're not some possession to be traded." The memory of her words followed me home, where I found Alexander already returned from work. Unusual for him. He was in his study, door open, phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried down the hallway, softer than his usual business tone. "Yes, I understand," he was saying. "Things will be different when you're back. I promise." I paused, hand resting on the wall. In 3 years of marriage, I had never heard that tone from him, gentle and almost yearning. He laughed then, a sound so foreign it made me step back. The rest of the evening passed in its usual routine. We ate dinner separately, Alexander in his study, me at the kitchen island with a tablet propped up, reviewing tomorrow's schedules. When I went to bed, he was still working, or at least pretending to. Lying alone in our king-sized bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Maya's message. Something was changing. I could feel it in the air like the pressure before a storm. For 3 years, I had maintained this perfect facade, played my role without complaint. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully constructed world was about to shatter. In my dreams that night, I walked through unfamiliar streets in period clothing, following someone I couldn't quite see. The dream felt more like a memory, tugging at something deep inside me. When I woke, the feeling lingered, along with a sense that something significant waited just beyond my understanding. The next morning brought news that would begin the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my sister, and myself. But in that moment, straightening Alexander's tie once again, I was still the perfect wife in our perfect arrangement, unaware that my world was about to change forever. Maya arrived on a Tuesday, wheeling her designer luggage through our penthouse door as if she'd never left. The sister who had once worn thrift store finds and borrowed my clothes now stood before me in Chanel, her hair styled in the latest European fashion. 2 years had transformed her from my carefree little sister into someone who looked more suited to our marble floors and crystal chandeliers than I ever had. "Vicky," she breathed, embracing me with a cloud of expensive perfume. "You look exactly the same." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or criticism. "Welcome home," I said, stepping back to really look at her. "How was your flight?" "First class makes everything bearable," she replied with a laugh that sounded practiced. "Is Alexander home?" The question caught me off guard. Maya had never shown interest in my husband before. In fact, she'd barely spoken his name since our wedding. "He's at work. He usually doesn't come home until late." Something flickered across her face. Of course, the dedicated CEO. I helped her settle into one of our guest rooms, watching as she unpacked items that probably cost more than my monthly allowance. Maya had always been the adventurous one, the sister who dreamed big and took risks. I'd been the practical one, the one who did what was expected. Now I wondered which of us had changed more. "Father's doing well," I told her as she arranged beauty products on the vanity. "The treatments in Switzerland have really helped." "I know," she said. "I visited him there last month." The casual revelation stung. I hadn't known she'd seen our father. He hadn't mentioned it in our weekly calls. "Oh," I managed. "That's wonderful." Maya turned to me, her expression softening. "Vicky, I know things have been strained between us, but I'm home now, and I want us to be close again." I wanted to believe her, but before I could respond, I heard the unexpected sound of the front door opening. Alexander's voice carried down the hallway, followed by footsteps approaching the guest room. He appeared in the doorway, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw genuine surprise on his face. "Maya," he said, her name coming out like a breath. She smiled, and something passed between them that made my stomach clench.
Hello,
The days
Alexander.
that followed took on a dreamlike quality. Maya integrated herself seamlessly into our lives, joining us for meals that had previously been eaten in separate rooms. Alexander began coming home earlier, his usual late nights. At the office shortened to make time for family dinners, where my sister dominated the conversation with stories of her European adventures. I watched them together, noting the way Alexander leaned forward when Maya spoke, how his eyes followed her movements. He laughed at her jokes, asked questions about her experiences, showed more interest in those conversations than he had in our entire marriage. One morning, a week after Maya's return, I discovered I was late. My periods had always been regular, a clockwork rhythm I could set my calendar by. The realization sent me to the nearest pharmacy, heart pounding as I purchased a pregnancy test. Standing in our ensuite bathroom, waiting for the results, I remembered the one night 2 months ago when Alexander had come home drunk from a business dinner. He'd stumbled into our bed and for once had reached for me, needed me. It had been clinical, brief, but it had been the first time in months we'd been intimate. 2 pink lines appeared on the test. I stared at them until my vision blurred, understanding that everything was about to change. A baby. Alexander's baby. Would this fix things? Create the real family I'd hoped for when I first agreed to this marriage? I tucked the test into my robe pocket, planning to tell Alexander that evening. But when I entered the kitchen, I heard voices from his study. The door was slightly ajar, and I caught a glimpse of Maya perched on his desk, her hand on his arm. "You can't keep pretending," she was saying softly. "We both know this isn't what you want." Alexander's response was too quiet to hear, but I saw him step closer to her, saw his hand rise to brush her cheek. The intimacy of the gesture froze me in place. "The contract was never meant to be permanent," he murmured, loud enough now for me to hear. "Father's condition about marriage is satisfied. The company is secure." "And Victoria?" Maya asked. She knew what this was from the beginning, a business arrangement, nothing more. I backed away silently, the pregnancy test burning like an accusation in my pocket. In the kitchen, I gripped the marble counter until my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to breathe normally. They were right, of course. This had always been a contract. A business deal. I was the one who had hoped for more. That evening, Alexander called me into his study. Maya was there, standing by the window with her arms crossed. I knew what was coming before he spoke. "The terms of our agreement have been fulfilled," he said, his voice carrying the same tone he used in business meetings. "I think it's time we discuss dissolution. Divorce," I clarified, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Yes, you'll be well provided for, of course. The prenuptial agreement ensures that." Maya stepped forward. "Vicky, we didn't mean for this to happen. Sometimes feelings just—" I cut her off with a raised hand. "How long?" "What do you mean?" Alexander asked, but his eyes slid away from mine. "How long have you been in love with my sister?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Maya had been gone for 2 years, but their connection apparently predated my marriage. I had been a placeholder, a necessary step in Alexander's path to securing his company. Now that requirement was fulfilled, I could be discarded. I left the study without another word, the pregnancy test still hidden in my robe pocket. They didn't follow me. In our bedroom, I began methodically packing a suitcase, selecting only items I had bought myself, leaving behind all of Alexander's gifts. The charity gala was the next evening. I had organized every detail, invited all the right people, ensured everything would be perfect. As I zipped my suitcase, I decided I would attend one last time, not for Alexander, not for appearances, but for myself. One final performance as Mrs. Chen before I figured out who Victoria would become next. What I didn't know then was that the gala would change everything, that across a crowded ballroom, I would meet a man who would make me question everything. I thought I knew about love, destiny, and the strange feeling that some connections transcend time itself. The Grand Hyatt ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the practiced laughter of Shanghai's elite. I stood at the entrance, wearing a deep burgundy gown I'd chosen months ago when I still believed in my marriage. Alexander and Maya had arrived separately, but I'd spotted them gravitating toward each other across the room, maintaining a careful distance that somehow made their connection more obvious. I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences from those who had already heard whispers of my impending divorce, the weight of the pregnancy test, though I had no intention of using it. Some part of me still couldn't believe how quickly my carefully constructed life had crumbled. "Mrs. Chen," a deep voice said behind me, or should I say Ms. Song. I turned to find James Mitchell watching me with intense dark eyes. Everyone in Shanghai's business circles knew James Mitchell, Alexander's most formidable rival and the CEO of Mitchell Industries. What I hadn't known was how my body would react to his presence, a jolt of recognition so strong it made me step back. "Mr. Mitchell?" I managed, fighting an inexplicable urge to reach for him. "Ms. Song is fine." He smiled, and something flickered in my mind like an old photograph, there and gone before I could grasp it. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. I should have declined. It would cause talk, Alexander's soon-to-be ex-wife dancing with his rival, but James's hand felt right in mine, familiar in a way that made my heart race. As he led me onto the dance floor, I caught Alexander watching us, his face unreadable. "The business world is buzzing about your divorce," James said as we moved to the music. "Chen's making a mistake. You hardly know me, Mr. Mitchell." "James," he corrected. "And I feel like I do know you, Victoria." Strange as that sounds, the sensation of deja vu intensified. His hand on my waist felt like a memory, his scent triggering images that couldn't be real. Different clothes, different music, but the same eyes looking into mine. A wave of dizziness hit me, and James steadied me. "Are you all right?" "Just tired," I said, though it was more than that. "The past few days have been challenging." He led me off the dance floor to a quiet corner. "You're pale. Let me get you some water." When he returned, I found myself telling him everything. The contract marriage, Maya's return, the betrayal. I held back only the pregnancy. certainty, that secret still too new and raw to share. I should have known, I concluded. The signs were there from the beginning. James leaned closer, his presence oddly comforting. Sometimes we see what we want to see. But Victoria, ending your marriage might be the best thing that could happen to you. Why do you say that? Because now you're free to find what's real. That night, I dreamed of a dance hall from another era. Women in chipaos, men in suits from the 1920s. James was there, but not quite James, leading me through a waltz while paper lanterns swayed overhead. I woke, gasping, the dream so vivid I could still smell the incense and hear the music. The divorce. Proceedings moved quickly. Alexander's lawyers presented me with generous terms, more than the prenuptial agreement required. I accepted without negotiation, wanting only to be free. But as I packed up my office in the penthouse, morning sickness hit hard. I barely made it to the bathroom, emptying my stomach while tears streamed down my face. When I opened the door, Maya stood there, concern etched on her features. "Vicky, are you sick?" I pushed past her. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. I heard you throwing up yesterday too." I turned to face my sister, really looking at her for the first time since her return. Despite everything, I could see traces of the girl who had once been my best friend. "Maya, please just leave it alone." "Oh God," she whispered, realization dawning. "You're pregnant." The words hung between us, heavy with implications. Maya's face paled. "Does Alexander know?" "No." I straightened my spine. "And he's not going to." "Vicky, you have to tell him. This changes everything." "It changes nothing. He made his choice. You made yours." Maya reached for me, but I stepped back. The baby deserves to know its father. The baby deserves better than a father who discarded its mother for her sister. I left her standing there, her protests following me down the hall. That evening, my phone lit up with text after text from both Maya and Alexander. I ignored them all. Instead, I found myself calling James Mitchell's office. His secretary put me through immediately, as if she'd been expecting my call. "Victoria," he said warmly, "I was hoping you'd contact me." "I need a job," I said without preamble. "I have a business degree gathering dust, and I refuse to live off Alexander's money." There was a pause, then a chuckle, direct and determined. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. I think we can find a place for you." That night, the dreams came again. James and I in traditional Chinese dress, walking through gardens I'd never seen. His hand in mine felt as real as it had at the gala, and when I woke, I could still feel the ghost of his touch. Morning found me in the Mitchell Industries lobby, wearing a suit instead of designer dresses for the first time in years. James met me personally, leading me through the modern office space to a conference room overlooking the city. "Before we discuss business," he said, closing the door, "I need to ask you something." The question stopped me cold. "Why?" "Because since the gala, I've been dreaming of you in a different time. It sounds crazy, but..." "The dance hall," I whispered. "Paper lanterns and incense." James's eyes widened. "You've seen it too." We stared at each other, the modern world falling away as something older, deeper stirred between us. But before we could explore it further, my phone buzzed. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. "Maya told him," I said, declining the call. "About the pregnancy." James's expression shifted to concern. "You're pregnant?" I nodded, waiting for him to withdraw the job offer, to distance himself from this complication. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Then, we have even more to discuss," he said, "because I think the universe is trying to tell us something, Victoria, and I for one am ready to listen." The warmth of his hand triggered another flash, a ring being slipped onto my finger in that other time, a promise made and broken by fate. As I met James's eyes, I knew with sudden clarity that this was more than an escape from my failed marriage. This was a beginning, or perhaps a continuation of something that had started long ago. My phone buzzed again with Alexander's call, but this time, I turned it off completely. Whatever came next, whatever these memories meant, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. My first week at Mitchell Industries passed in a blur of meetings, presentations, and stolen glances with James. He had given me a position in corporate strategy, insisting my business degree and intimate knowledge of Chen Group's operations made me valuable beyond measure. I knew some employees whispered about favoritism, about the boss hiring his rival's cast-off wife, but I was determined to prove myself. The morning sickness grew worse, forcing me to keep crackers in my desk drawer and schedule my meetings around when I felt strongest. James noticed, bringing me ginger tea and checking on me with quiet concern that made my heart ache in familiar ways. I had moved into a serviced apartment, refusing to touch the money Alexander had given me in the divorce settlement. The space was small but mine, free from memories of my failed marriage. At night, the dreams continued, growing clearer and more detailed. In one particularly vivid dream, I saw myself in a red cheap house how, sneaking through back alleys with James to meet in secret. His family disapproved of me, a merchant's daughter beneath their social station. We had planned to elope, to escape to Hong Kong, where no one would know us. I woke from that dream to find tears on my pillow, and my phone lit up with notifications. Maya had announced her engagement to Alexander on social media, barely a month after my divorce was finalized. The photos showed them at our old favorite restaurant, her wearing a ring I recognized from the Chen family collection. James found me in my office that morning, staring blankly at the engagement announcement. Without a word, he closed the door and pulled me into his arms. I breathed in his scent, so familiar from both this life and our dreams of the past. "They look happy," I said against his chest. "Are you?" The question made me pull back to look at him. "I'm getting there." That evening, James invited me to dinner at his home, a beautiful house in the French concession area. As we sat in his garden, surrounded by flowering trees that reminded me of our shared dreams, he finally asked the question we'd both been avoiding. "What do you think it means? These memories we share?" I touched the jade pendant at my throat, another fragment from our dreams that had somehow found its way into reality. "I think we knew each other before. I think we loved each other and lost each other," he added softly. "I remember that now. There was a fire at the dance hall. I got you out, but when I went back for others, my hand found his across the table. You didn't make it." The pregnancy was becoming harder to hide. At 12 weeks, my fitted business suits were starting to strain, and the morning sickness showed no signs of abating. James suggested I see his family doctor, a discreet woman who had known him since childhood. Dr. Lin confirmed what I already knew. The baby was healthy, growing strong. When she asked about the father, I hesitated before admitting it was Alexander Chen. Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "You'll need support," she said gently, "both during the pregnancy and after." "I have support," I replied, thinking of James. That night, I dreamed of a different pregnancy, one from our past life. We had been so happy, planning our escape, until the fire took everything. I woke sobbing, my hands protectively curved around my current child. The next morning brought news I had been dreading. Alexander's secretary called to schedule a meeting, his tone making it clear refusal wasn't an option. A private room at the Ritz-Carlton. James offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I had to handle alone. When I arrived, Alexander was already there, looking impeccable in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "You're showing," he said by way of greeting. 14 weeks now. He gestured for me to sit, remaining standing himself. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything?" "Of course it would have. This is my child." I placed my hands protectively over my stomach. "This child is mine. You made your choice, Alexander. You chose my sister. I have rights," he said, his voice taking on the hard edge I recognized from business negotiations. "Legal rights. To what? A child you didn't want until you found out about it? A child you'd have to explain to your new wife? My sister?" He paced the room, his composure cracking. "Maya understands. We've discussed it. The idea of them discussing my baby, planning its future without me, made me nauseous in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. I won't let you use this child to control me, Alexander. Not like you used our marriage. I never." "You did, and now you're trying to do it again." I stood, gathering my strength. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We can discuss arrangements that don't involve you disrupting this child's life or mine." As I reached the door, he called out, "I saw you with Mitchell. Are you sleeping with him already?" I turned back, seeing not the powerful CEO, but a man losing control of a situation for perhaps the first time in his life. "What James and I have is real, something you wouldn't understand." That evening, I told James everything about the meeting. We sat in his garden again, the same place where we had first acknowledged our shared past. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. "Let me help. Protect you both. People will talk. Let them. Victoria, I've loved you in 2 lifetimes now. I'm not losing you again." The dreams that night were the clearest yet. I saw our first meeting in that past life, the instant recognition, the stolen moments, the plans we made. I saw the fire that took him from me, felt the grief that had somehow echoed through time until we found each other again. When I woke, I knew what I had to do. I called my lawyer first, then began packing my things. By sunset, I was moved into James's house, my few possessions finding their place among his, as if they had always belonged there. That night, as we lay in bed together, his hand resting protectively over our growing child, I felt complete in a way I never had with Alexander. This was what real love felt like, spanning lifetimes, surviving death and separation to find its way home. "We'll face Alexander together," James murmured against my hair. "Whatever comes, we face it together." This time, I drifted off to sleep thinking of the jade pendant, of dance halls and secret meetings, of a love so strong it had found its way back through time, time. Outside our window, the Shanghai skyline glittered like stars, so different from the city of our past life, yet somehow just as magical. The next morning would bring challenges: Alexander's lawyers, Maya's tearful phone calls, the gossip that would surely follow when news of my relationship with James became public. But for now, wrapped in the arms of a man I had loved across lifetimes, I was finally truly home. The pain started during a morning meeting, sharp and unexpected. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the quarterly projections displayed on the screen, but James noticed immediately. His eyes met mine across the conference table, concern evident in his expression. "Meeting adjourned," he announced, cutting off the presenter mid-sentence. The room cleared quickly, leaving us alone. "Something's wrong," I whispered, clutching my abdomen. At 16 weeks, any pain felt like a threat to the precious life growing inside me. James was already calling his driver. "We're going to the hospital now." The drive was a blur of increasing discomfort, and James's steady hand holding mine. Dr. Lin met us at the emergency entrance, alerted by James's call. She whisked me into an examination room, her face professional, but tight with worry. "How long have you been experiencing pain?" she asked, preparing the ultrasound machine. "Just this morning." I thought it was normal pregnancy discomfort. James stood by my head, his fingers threaded through mine as Dr. Lin spread the cold gel across my stomach. The room filled with the rapid whoosh whoosh of our baby's heartbeat, strong and steady, despite my fears. "The baby looks healthy," Dr. Lin said, studying the screen, "but you're showing signs of placental distress. We need to admit you for observation." The next hours passed in a haze of monitors, blood draws, and worried conversations. James never left my side, even when the nurses suggested he go home to rest. He worked from taking a laptop, calls in whispers and sending emails one-handed while keeping hold of me with the other. Maya arrived first, her designer heels clicking against the hospital floor. She looked out of place among the medical equipment, clutching a boutique gift bag like a shield. "Alexander's on his way," she said, hovering uncertainly by the door. We were in a board meeting when we heard. James straightened in his chair but said nothing. I appreciated his restraint, knowing how much he disliked both my sister and my ex-husband. "You didn't have to come," I told Maya. She stepped closer, setting down the gift bag. "Of course I did. You're my sister, and that's my niece or nephew." Before I could respond, Alexander appeared in the doorway. He had loosened his tie, a rare sign of dishevelment that spoke to his haste in arriving. His eyes took in the scene, me in the hospital bed, James by my side, Maya standing awkwardly between us. "What happened?" he demanded. Dr. Lin chose that moment to return, her arrival breaking the tension. She explained the situation in clinical terms, emphasizing the need for reduced stress and complete bed rest for at least a week. "I want her transferred to private hospital," Alexander said. "They have the best maternal care unit in Shanghai." "She's not going anywhere," James replied, his voice calm but firm. "Dr. Lin is the best obstetrician in the city, and Victoria is staying under her care." I watched my past and present collide in that hospital room. Alexander, used to controlling every situation. Maya, caught between loyalty to her fiancé and concern for her sister. And James, whose love had somehow found me across lifetimes. "It's my decision," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm staying here." Alexander opened his mouth to argue, but Dr. Lin interrupted. "The patient needs rest. Everyone except the father should leave." The irony of her words hung in the air. Alexander was the biological father, but James was the one who had been by my side through everything. After a tense moment, Alexander nodded curtly and left, Maya trailing behind him. That night, lying in the hospital bed with monitors beeping softly around me, I had another dream of our past life. In it, I was also pregnant, also afraid. But that fear had been of discovery, of our families finding out about our love and the child we had created together. I woke to find James watching me, his face illuminated by the dim hospital lights. "You were talking in your sleep," he said, softly, in Shanghainese dialect. "I was remembering," I replied. "We lost that baby, didn't we? In our past life." He nodded, pain flickering across his features. "The fire happened before you could tell me about the pregnancy. I only found out later, from your sister in that life." I placed his hand on my stomach, feeling our current child move beneath his touch. "This time will be different. We're together, now." The next morning, Dr. Lin arrived with cautiously good news. The placental issues had stabilized, but she wanted me on modified bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. No work, no stress, minimal activity. "I can't just stop working," I protested. "The Chen merger analysis is due next week." "The analysis can wait," James said firmly. "Nothing is more important than your health and our babies." I caught his use of "our" and saw Dr. Lin's slight smile. She had known James since he was a child, had probably seen him through many of life's challenges. Now she was helping him protect what we had found together. Alexander sent his lawyers the next day, armed with documents demanding shared medical decision-making rights and guaranteed visitation after the birth. James's legal team responded with equal force, pointing out that Alexander had signed away any claims during our divorce. "He's scared," James said as we reviewed the legal documents in my hospital room. "He's realizing what he gave up." I thought of Alexander and Maya's engagement photos, their perfectly coordinated smiles and carefully chosen poses. "He made his choice, and you made yours," James replied, bringing my hand to his lips. That evening, after James had gone home to change and handle some urgent business matters, Maya returned alone. She sat in the visitor's chair, twisting her engagement ring nervously. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said. "When I came back, seeing Alexander again, all those old feelings resurfaced." "Old feelings?" She looked away. "We met at a business conference in Paris last year. Nothing happened then, but when I came back, understanding dawned. My marriage had been a convenient cover, allowing them time to figure out their feelings while maintaining appearances. The knowledge should have hurt, but instead, I felt oddly freed by it. I hope you'll be happy together," I said, meaning it. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought of James, of our shared dream, death itself to find us again. "I already have. You helped me find my way to where I was always meant to be." Dr. Lin discharged me the next day with strict instructions and a schedule of monitoring appointments. James had already prepared a room on the ground floor of his house, eliminating the need for stairs. As his driver helped me from the car, I saw he had added a small garden outside the room's French doors, complete with the same flowering trees from our shared memories. "Welcome home," he said, supporting me as I walked slowly to the bed. "Both of you." That night, wrapped in James's arms with our baby moving between us, I dreamed of lanterns and jade pendants, of secret meetings and promised futures. But this time, when I woke, the reality was even better than the dream. Alexander's lawyers were still fighting, Maya was still calling with tearful apologies, and my pregnancy was still high risk. But with James beside me, his love proven across lifetimes, I knew we would face it all together. This time, nothing would tear us apart. The memories came more frequently during my bed rest, vivid flashes of our past life together that felt as real as the present. James and I would spend evenings in the garden room he had prepared, sharing these fragments as they surfaced, piecing together our previous story like an ancient puzzle. "The jade pendant," I said one night, touching the necklace I now wore constantly. "You gave it to me at the Mid-Autumn Festival when we first decided to elope." James nodded, his fingers joining mine on the smooth stone. "My mother's pendant. She never forgave me for giving it to a merchant's daughter. At 20 weeks pregnant, my body had adjusted to the restricted activity. The baby grew stronger, each day active and healthy despite the earlier complications. Dr. Lin's regular visits brought consistently good news, though she maintained her caution about returning to work. Alexander's lawyers continued their campaign, now demanding genetic testing to establish paternity officially. My legal team advised compliance, arguing it would strengthen our position in the long run. The test results were a formality, confirming what we already knew. Alexander was the biological father. "This changes nothing," James said when the results arrived. "Biology isn't what makes a family." We were sitting in our garden room, the evening air sweet with jasmine, when James knelt beside my chair. In his hand was a ring I recognized from both this life and our last, a gold band set with a perfect pearl. "In our past life, I had this made for you by a craftsman in the French concession," he said softly. "When I found it in my family's vault last month, I knew it was meant for you again. The original was lost in the fire," I whispered, memories flooding back. "Not lost. Found its way back, like we did." He held up the ring. "Marry me, Victoria. In this life, let's finish what we started in the last." Before I could answer, a sharp kick from the baby made us both laugh. "I think someone's voting yes," I said, tears blurring my vision. James slipped the ring onto my finger, and for a moment, I saw double. The modern garden room overlaid with a lantern-lit pavilion, both moments perfect in their own way. The news of our engagement broke the next morning. Alexander's reaction came swift and fierce, his lawyers filing for emergency custody rights before the child was even born. Maya called in tears, begging me to reconsider, to give Alexander time to adjust. "He's not thinking clearly," she pleaded. "He feels like he's losing everything. He can't lose what was never his," I replied gently. My heart belonged to James. Before any of us knew it, the dreams that night were the most vivid yet. I saw our first wedding ceremony, performed in secret by a sympathetic Buddhist monk. James wore traditional robes, and I wore red silk embroidered with golden phoenixes. We had been so happy, so certain our love would conquer all obstacles. I woke to find James watching me, his eyes full of understanding. "We'll do it properly this time," he promised. "No secrets, no running away." Dr. Lin's Lynn's next visit brought unexpected joy. The baby was a girl. As she moved the ultrasound wand across my rounded belly, I saw James wipe away tears. In our shared memories, we had never learned the gender of our lost child. "She's perfect," Dr. Lynn announced, printing out images for us. "And her mother's health has improved significantly. I think we can relax some of the bed rest restrictions." The freedom to move more freely came just in time for wedding preparations. James insisted on a small ceremony in his garden, with only our closest friends and my parents in attendance. Maya sent a gift but didn't attend, caught between loyalty to her fiancé and love for her sister. My father walked me down the aisle between the flowering trees, past lanterns that echoed our memories. James wearing a modern suit that somehow reminded me of his traditional robes from our past life. "In this life and all others," we added to our vows, words that made sense only to us. That evening, as we danced under the lanterns, I felt our past and present merge completely. The baby kicked between us, a new life binding together all our stories. Alexander's lawyers delivered their latest demands the morning after our wedding. They wanted scheduled visits during pregnancy, claiming it would help establish a bond with the child. James's legal team responded with a firm rejection, citing the stress such visits would cause. "He's not giving up," I said, reviewing the documents from my comfortable position on our bedroom sofa. James sat beside me, his hand protective over our growing daughter. "Neither are we." The next ultrasound revealed our daughter sucking her thumb, a sight that brought fresh tears to both our eyes. Dr. Lynn printed extra copies of the image, knowing we were collecting every precious moment. "She has your nose," James said, studying the profile view. "At least she has the nose you had in our past life." I laughed, remembering how he had described my previous incarnation from his dreams, "and hopefully your strength in both lives." That night, another memory surfaced. James and I planning names for our first child, whispering possibilities in the secret darkness of the dance hall. Now, in our garden room, we continued that conversation. "What about Lian?" James suggested. "It means lotus in Chinese. Beautiful but strong, growing from the depths to reach the light." The name resonated with something deep in my soul, a connection to both past and present. "Lian Mitchell," I tested the sound. "It's perfect." A week later, Alexander requested a meeting through his lawyers. Against James's wishes, but with his support, I agreed to see my ex-husband in a neutral location, a private room at his club. Alexander looked tired, the confident CEO facade showing cracks. "I've been dreaming about you," he said without preamble. "But not you now. You in old Shanghai wearing traditional clothes." My heart stopped for a moment. "What do you mean?" "You and Mitchell, in a dance hall. There was a fire." He ran a hand through his usually perfect hair. "Am I going crazy?" "No." I touched my jade pendant, wondering how many others carried fragments of that past life. "You're remembering something that happened long ago. I was there, wasn't I? I saw you together, reported you to his family." The realization dawned in his eyes. "I'm the reason you were in that dance hall that night, the reason for the fire." I left him sitting there, his words confirming what James and I had somehow known but never spoken. Alexander's soul had played a part in our past tragedy, but this time, in this life, we had changed the story. James was waiting at home, somehow knowing I would need him. As I told him about Alexander's memories, he held me close, our daughter moving between us. "The past is past," he said firmly. "This time, we write our own ending." That night, my dreams were not of old Shanghai, but of the future, our daughter, growing up in the garden, learning to walk beneath the flowering trees, hearing stories of love that transcended time itself. When I woke, James was sketching plans for a nursery, his free hand resting protectively over our growing child. In the soft morning light, watching him plan for our future, I finally felt completely at peace. The past had brought us together again, but the future was ours to create. The legal threats escalated as my pregnancy progressed. At 28 weeks, Alexander's lawyers filed for pre-birth parental rights, a move that sent my blood pressure soaring during a routine checkup with Dr. Lynn. "This has to stop," James said firmly, reviewing my latest test results. "The stress is affecting both Victoria and the baby," Dr. Lynn agreed, documenting her medical concerns for our lawyers. "Any further legal proceedings should wait until after the birth. The health risks are too high." That evening, Maya arrived unannounced at our door. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual designer armor. "Can we talk?" James helped me settle into the garden room before giving us privacy, though I knew he would stay within earshot. My sister perched on the edge of a chair, twisting her engagement ring. I saw the medical reports, she said quietly. What Alexander's doing? It's wrong. Why are you here, Maya? She looked up, tears in her eyes. Because I remember too, not just fragments like Alexander, but everything. I was your sister then as well, the one who helped you meet in secret. I tried to warn you about the fire. The memory hit me with sudden clarity. Maya, in traditional dress, rushing to the dance hall to warn us about Alexander's plan. She had tried to save us then, just as she was trying to help now. Alexander's obsessed with the past. He keeps talking about making things right, about not losing his child this time, but he's making the same mistakes, trying to control everything. And you? I'm making my own mistakes. She touched her engagement ring. I thought, I loved him, but watching him now, seeing who he really is, I can't marry him. The baby kicked, as if responding to the emotion in the room. Maya's eyes fixed on my rounded belly. Will you let me be part of her life? She asked softly. Let me be her aunt in this lifetime too? James found me crying after Maya left. Happy tears this time. She's leaving him, I explained. She remembers everything, and she's choosing to break the cycle. That night, our dreams aligned perfectly for the first time. We saw Maya in our past life, young and brave, trying to save us. We saw Alexander's rage when he discovered our plans to elope. We saw the deliberate fire, set to destroy our happiness. He has to know we remember, James said in the morning. That's why he's fighting so hard for control now. The legal battles paused abruptly the next day. Maya had gone public with her reasons for breaking the engagement, citing Alexander's obsessive behavior and manipulation. The scandal rocked Shanghai's business community, and Alexander retreated from public view. At 32 weeks, Dr. Lin ordered complete bed rest again. The baby was healthy but active, and my body showed signs of early labor. James moved his office into our bedroom, conducting business from a makeshift desk beside my bed. I'm not leaving anything to chance this time, he said, scheduling video conferences around my nap times. Our peaceful routine was shattered one evening by urgent knocking. James opened the door to find Alexander, disheveled and clearly drunk. I need to see her, he demanded. I need to make it right. James blocked his path. You need to leave. You don't understand. I set that fire. I killed our baby. I have to fix it. The confession echoed through the house. I struggled to sit up in bed, one hand protective over our daughter. Alexander, I called out. Come in. Let's talk. James protested, but I squeezed his hand. This confrontation had been brewing across lifetimes. It needed to happen. Alexander stumbled into our bedroom, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes wild. I remember everything now. The jealousy, the rage. I couldn't stand seeing you together. That was another life, I said gently. We can't change the past, but I can change the future. This baby, she's mine. I can protect her this time. James moved to stand between us. This baby is ours. Victoria and I are her parents. You lost any claim to her when you chose Maya, just like you lost Victoria in our past life when you chose your pride. Alexander sank into a chair, his anger deflating. I keep dreaming of the fire, of watching it burn, knowing you were inside. I thought having the baby would make the dreams stop. The dreams won't stop until you let go, I said. Until you accept that some loves are meant to be, across all lifetimes. We sat in silence, the weight of centuries hanging between us. Finally, Alexander stood. Maya was right about me, he said quietly. I haven't changed at all. After he left, James held me while I cried for all of us, for the pain that had followed us through time. The baby kicked steadily, a reminder that this life was different, that we had a chance to write a new story. The next morning, Alexander's lawyers withdrew all legal claims. A formal letter arrived, acknowledging James's role as father and requesting only occasional updates about the child's welfare. He's letting go, I said, reading the letter. Finally, Maya called that evening to tell us she was moving to London, starting fresh. Take care of my niece, she said. Give her all the love she missed in our last life. As my due date approached, the dreams of our past life began to fade, replaced by visions of our future. James completed the nursery, painting clouds on the ceiling and filling bookshelves with stories in both English and Chinese. Dr. Lin monitored me closely, determined to ensure this pregnancy would end differently than our last. Each checkup brought us closer to meeting our daughter, to holding the soul who had waited lifetimes to join our family. She's already loved across centuries, James said one night, his hand spanning my belly. This time, we'll get it right. The contractions started on a night filled with lanterns, the mid-autumn festival painting the sky with light. As James rushed me to the hospital, hospital. I smiled at the symmetry. Our daughter choosing to arrive on the same festival when, in another life, we had first pledged our love. Maya arrived at the hospital while I was in labor, her flight from London landing just hours after my first contractions. She slipped into the delivery room during a brief break between doctor's visits, her face tight with concern. "I had to come," she said. I couldn't let history repeat itself. Not this time. James looked up from his position beside me, understanding dawning in his eyes. In our past life, Maya had tried to reach us before the fire. Now she was here, making sure. This birth had a different ending. The contractions intensified as the night wore on. Dr. Lin monitored everything closely, her calm presence anchoring us through each wave of pain. James never left my side, whispering encouragement and love in both English and Chinese. "She's strong," Dr. Lin said, checking the monitors. "Both mother and baby are doing well." Through the haze of labor, memories of our past life surfaced. I saw the dance hall again, felt the terror of the fire, remembered the child we had lost. But this time, the memories brought strength instead of fear. We had found each other again, across time and tragedy, and nothing would separate us now. Maya paced the hallway, alternating between making calls to our parents and bringing ice chips. Her presence felt right, completing a circle that had begun. In another lifetime. I spoke to Alexander, she told James during one of her visits. "He's staying away, but he sent his prayers. I think he's finally understanding." The delivery room filled with soft morning light as our daughter made her final journey into the world. Dr. Lin's experienced hands guided her out as James held me, his tears falling into my hair. "She's here," Dr. Lin announced, placing our crying daughter on my chest. Born on the morning after the Mid-Autumn Festival, just like her parents planned in another life, Leon Mitchell entered the world with a strong cry and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. She had Alexander's chin but my eyes, and when she gripped James's finger with her tiny hand, the connection was undeniable. Maya watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," she whispered. "Everything we fought for, everything we lost, it was all for this moment." The first few days in the hospital passed in a blur of visitors, checkups, and quiet moments of bonding. Our parents came, bringing traditional gifts and modern necessities. Maya stayed, helping with everything from diaper changes to fielding calls from well-wishers. On our last morning in the hospital, an unexpected delivery arrived. A small jade pendant, identical to the one I wore, with a note from Alexander. "For Leon," it read. "May she grow up knowing only love and peace. I release any claim to her, acknowledging that some bonds transcend blood. Take care of our daughter, James. You were always meant to be her father." James held me while I cried, our daughter sleeping peacefully in her hospital bassinet. Maya read the note and smiled through her tears. "He's found his peace," she said softly. "We all have." Bringing Leon home felt like completing a journey that had begun centuries ago. James had transformed the garden room into a temporary nursery, filling it with soft lights that reminded us of the lanterns from our past life. That first night home, as we watched our daughter sleep, the final pieces of our shared memories fell into place. We remembered everything, the joy of our secret, love, the pain of separation, the tragedy of loss. But now those memories were overlaid with new ones, happier ones. Maya stayed with us for a week, helping us adjust to life with a newborn. She took countless photos of Leon, documenting every tiny change and milestone. "I'm going back to London," she announced one evening, "but I'll visit often. She needs her aunt in this life too." Before leaving, Maya handed me a leather-bound journal. "I've been writing down our memories, all of them. Someday, when she's old enough, Leon should know her story, how love brought her parents together across lifetimes." The days settled into a new routine. James worked from home more often, unwilling to miss any moments with our daughter. I recovered quickly, stronger than I had been in either life. Dr. Lin visited regularly, checking on both Leon and me. "Some souls are meant to find each other," she said, watching James cradle our daughter. "You three have proven that." The dreams of our past life began to fade, replaced by the vibrant reality of our present. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of early morning, I would catch glimpses of our other life in Leon's eyes, or in the way James held her. 1 month after Leon's birth, we received news that Alexander had moved to Singapore, starting fresh in a new city. Maya reported that he seemed at peace, finally free from the weight of past actions. "He dreams of her sometimes," Maya said during one of our video calls. "Not as his child, but as a symbol of redemption. He understands now that letting go was the greatest gift he could give." James and I created new traditions, blending elements from both our lives. We celebrated the Mid-Autumn Festival in our garden, surrounding Leon with lanterns like the ones that... Next year, James said, watching our daughter sleep in my arms, we'll tell her the first part of her story, how her parents loved each other so much that not even time could keep them apart. I touched the jade pendant at my throat, matching the tiny one we had put away for Leon's future, and how her aunt and her biological father found their own peace by helping us find ours. As the lanterns glowed in our garden, casting soft light over our sleeping daughter, I felt the last threads of our past life settle into place. We had done more than survive this time. We had triumphed, creating a love story that spanned centuries and a family that defied even death itself. Maya called that night, her face glowing through the screen as she sang a lullaby to her niece. The same lullaby we realized that she had sung to comfort me in our past life. Some bonds never break, she said softly. They just grow stronger with each lifetime. Looking at James holding our daughter, remembering the path that had brought us here, I knew Maya was right. Love, real love, finds a way to endure. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it brings you home across lifetimes to the family you were always meant to have. The final memory surfaced during Leon's first birthday celebration. We had filled the garden with lanterns, recreating the magical atmosphere of our past life's meetings. As I watched James dance with our daughter, the scene overlapped with another. The last night at the dance hall, before everything changed. I saw it clearly now. Alexander had discovered our plans to elope through a betrayal by one of the hall's workers. Enraged, he had ordered the doors barred and the fire set, intending only to scare us. But the flames had spread too quickly, trapping dozens of people inside. James had gotten me out through a hidden door, then gone back for others. In the chaos, no one realized I was carrying his child. The smoke and terror had caused me to lose the baby days later, and grief had taken me soon after. The memory hit with such force that I stumbled. James caught me, his eyes reflecting the same recognition. I remember everything now, I whispered. How the fire started. Why Alexander carried that guilt through lifetimes. Leon reached for my jade pendant, her tiny fingers wrapping around the stone that had survived both lives. The touch grounded me in the present, reminding me that this time was different. Maya found us like that, the three of us holding each other under the lantern light. She had flown in from London for the birthday celebration, bringing gifts and more pages for the family journal she kept. I remember too, she said softly. I was almost there in time to warn you. I saw Alexander give the order, but I couldn't reach you before the fire started. James shifted Leon to one arm, reaching out to squeeze Maya's hand. You tried. In both lives, you've tried to protect us. The party continued around us, friends and family celebrating our daughter's first year. But in that moment, the four souls who remembered gathered in a quiet corner of the garden. Alexander called me this morning, Maya said. The memories are complete for him now too. He wanted me to tell you he understands everything, why it had to be this way. Leon's laughter drew our attention back to the present. She was reaching for the lanterns, her eyes bright with wonder. In her face, I saw echoes of both lives. The child we had lost, and the daughter we had now. She's going to want to know someday, James said, about her past, about Alexander, about how love can span lifetimes. Maya pulled out her journal, its pages filled with our intertwined histories. That's why I've been writing everything down, so she'll understand where she comes from, all the love that brought her here. The evening aged into night, lanterns glowing brighter against the darkening sky. Our guests gradually departed, leaving just our small family unit. Leon fell asleep in James's arms, one hand still clutching her miniature jade pendant. I've been thinking, Maya said as we sat in the garden, about past lives and redemption. Alexander set that fire out of jealousy and pride, but in this life, he chose to let go. He broke the cycle. We all did, I replied. You chose to help us instead of standing with him. James and I found each other again. Even the jade pendants found their way back. James touched the matching stones at Leon's neck and mine. Some bonds are meant to be. They find a way to endure. That night, after Maya left for her hotel, and Leon was tucked safely in her crib, James and I sat in our garden room. The space had become more than just a room. It was a bridge between our past and present, where both lives felt equally real. I used to dream of this, James said softly. In our past life, I imagined us having a family, watching our child grow. Even in death, I carried that dream. I leaned into him. This wasn't just another dream. We made it real. Everything we wished for then, we have now. The final memory played out like a gentle wave. Our last moment together together in the dance hall before James went back into the flames. We had kissed goodbye, not knowing it was the end, both believing we had all the time in the world. "I wanted to tell you about the baby," I whispered. "That last night I had planned to tell you after we escaped." James pulled me closer. "I know. Somehow, I think I always knew. That's why finding you again, having Leon, it feels like completing something that was left unfinished." Through the monitor, we heard Leon's soft breathing. Our daughter, born from one man's blood but another man's soul, sleeping peacefully in the home love had built. "The memories are complete now," James said. "We remember everything, the joy and the pain, but the past doesn't control us anymore." In the garden, the lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze, the same lanterns that had lit our secret meetings, that had burned in the tragic fire, now illuminated our second chance at happiness. Maya called the next morning, her voice excited. "Alexander sent me something, a newspaper article from 1920, about the dance hall fire. It mentions both of you by name." "What does it say?" I asked, watching James prepare Leon's breakfast. "It calls you star-crossed lovers, separated by society but united in death." The reporter wrote that even as the building burned, witnesses saw James going back in to save others. They found his body shielding an elderly couple from the flames. Tears filled my eyes as James took the phone. "Maya, can you send us the article?" "Already done. I'm adding it to the journal. Leon should know her father was a hero in both lives." After the call ended, James and I sat in silence, processing this final piece of our shared history. Leon babbled happily in her high chair, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "You were always running toward danger to help others," I said finally. "In every life, that's who you are." James smiled, lifting our daughter into his arms. "And you were always worth coming back for, even if it took me another lifetime to find you again." The morning sun filtered through our garden room windows, casting warm light over our family. Outside, the lanterns from Leon's party still hung, no longer needed to light secret meetings, but chosen to celebrate love that had conquered time itself. In that moment, watching James dance with our daughter in the sunlight, I knew we had finally healed the wounds of our past life. The fire that had separated us had led to this deeper union, this family forged through time and tragedy and triumph. Maya's journal would tell our story someday, when Leon was old enough to understand. She would learn about the father who gave her life and the father who gave her love, about the aunt who protected her across lifetimes, and about parents whose love was strong enough to find its way home again. But for now, in the gentle morning light, we were simply a family, complete, at peace, and finally, where we were always meant to be. The confrontation we had all sensed brewing finally erupted during a summer storm. Alexander appeared at our door unannounced, soaked from the rain, and wild-eyed. Maya's recent engagement announcement to a British businessman had triggered something in him, bringing all his suppressed emotions to the surface. "I need to see her," he demanded, pushing past James into our foyer. "I need to see my daughter." James moved to block his path to the nursery. "Leon is sleeping. You need to leave." I stepped between them, my heart racing but my voice steady. "Alexander, you signed away your rights. You agreed to respect our boundaries." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his desperate expression. "I made a mistake, seeing Maya happy with someone else. Knowing you have the life I threw away. I can't keep pretending this is right." The sound of Leon crying through the baby monitor broke the tension. James started toward the nursery, but Alexander moved faster. We found him standing over Leon's crib, tears streaming down his face. Our daughter stared up at him with curious eyes, showing no fear of this stranger who shared her blood. "She has my chin," he whispered, "but your eyes." James lifted Leon from her crib, cradling her protectively. She immediately snuggled into his chest, her tiny hand gripping his shirt in a gesture of complete trust. "Look at her," I said softly. "Really look, Alexander. She knows who her father is." The truth of it seemed to hit him physically. He staggered back, watching James soothe our daughter with practiced ease. Every lullaby, every gentle bounce, every soft kiss to her forehead spoke of a bond that went beyond biology. Maya arrived minutes later, having received my urgent text. She took in the scene with understanding born from 2 lifetimes of watching our story unfold. "Let go, please, this time. Just let go." He turned to her, his composure cracking. "I keep trying, but seeing her with him, knowing that should have been me." "No." Maya's voice was firm. "This is exactly as it should be. James and Victoria were meant to be Leon's parents. In both lives, their love created something beautiful." Thunder rolled outside as Alexander sank into a chair. "I dream about them every night. The fire, the screams, watching it burn. Knowing they were inside. I did that. I destroyed their happiness. And now you have a chance to make it right," Maya said. "Not by claiming Leon, but by letting her have the family she was always meant to have." James had settled into the rocking chair with Leon, who was drifting back to sleep. The sight of them together, so natural and right, seemed to finally break through Alexander's defenses. "I thought having her would fix everything," he admitted, "would erase what I did in our past life. But seeing her with you, seeing how much she loves you both, I understand now." The rain began to ease as we talked through the night. Alexander shared his memories of our past life, filling in details we hadn't known, how he had watched our secret meetings for months before setting the fire, how Maya had tried to stop him, how the guilt had followed his soul through time. "I want to make this right," he said finally. "Really right this time." The next morning, Alexander's lawyers delivered new papers. He was legally transferring all parental rights to James, making him Leon's father in every way that mattered. Maya stayed for a few days, helping us all adjust to this new reality. She and Alexander had long talks in our garden, finding their own kind of closure. "He's going back to Singapore," she told us. "For good this time. His company is opening a new headquarters there." James squeezed my hand as we watched Leon playing on her blanket. "And you? Will you go back to London?" Maya smiled, shaking her head. "I'm staying in Shanghai. My fiancé is relocating here. Some families need to stay together, across all lifetimes." The days that followed felt lighter somehow. Alexander's acceptance had lifted a weight none of us had fully acknowledged. Leon continued to flourish, growing more beautiful and strong each day. We received a package from Singapore a month later. Inside was a trust fund in Leon's name, along with a letter Alexander had written for her future. "My dearest Leon," it began, "someday you'll learn the truth about your family's history, about how love can transcend time, and how sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Your parents, James and Victoria, share a bond that has survived death itself. They were always meant to be your parents. In this life and any other, know that you are loved, not just by them, but by an aunt who has protected your family across lifetimes, and by a man who learned too late the difference between possessing and loving." The final memory of our past life came clearly then. Not the fire or the tragedy, but a quiet moment in the dance hall. James and I swaying to distant music, planning our future, dreaming of the family we would create, looking at our daughter playing in her father's arms, at Maya recording everything in her journal. I realized we had finally achieved that dream, not in the way we had planned, but in the way fate had always intended. The storm had passed, leaving our garden fresh and renewed. Like us, it had weathered the tempest and emerged stronger. Under the clearing sky, our family found its final piece of peace. Maya added the last entry to her journal that evening. "And so the story comes full circle," she wrote. "Love lost and found again, souls reunited, wounds healed across time. Leanne will grow up knowing she was born from more than blood or biology. She was born from a love so strong it refused to die, and from the courage of those who learned to let that love live as it was meant to." Outside, the first stars appeared. In the clearing sky, James lit the garden lanterns, not to guide secret lovers home, but to celebrate a family that had finally found its way through time to exactly where they belonged. Leon's second birthday approached with the promise of new beginnings. Maya returned from London permanently, her British fiancé having relocated his business to Shanghai. She moved into a penthouse just blocks from our home, completing our modern family circle. The morning brought unexpected news from Singapore. Alexander had sent a formal announcement. He was getting married. The bride was a local artist he had met at a gallery opening, someone with no connection to our shared past. "He sounds happy," Maya said, reading his email over breakfast in our garden. "Really happy, for the first time since I've known him. In this life." James bounced Leon on his knee, our daughter's laughter filling the morning air. Sometimes letting go is the only way to find. The wedding preparations consumed our days. Not Alexander's distant ceremony, but Maya's approaching nuptials. She had chosen our garden as her venue, wanting to marry surrounded by the love that had transcended lifetimes. "William knows everything," she told us, referring to her fiancé, "about our past lives, about Alexander, about how our family came to be. He understands why this place matters." Leon toddled between us as we planned, her steps growing more confident each day. She had James's gentle nature and my determination, plus a spark entirely her own. The jade pendant never left her neck, matching the ones her mother and aunt wore. 3 generations of protection, 3 souls connected across time. News came from Singapore again. Alexander and his fiancé had eloped. The simple ceremony took place at sunrise in a Buddhist temple, with only the monks as witnesses. "He wrote that he finally understands," Maya said, reading his message, "about love that doesn't need witnesses or approval, about choosing happiness over pride." The day of Maya's wedding dawned clear and bright. Our garden bloomed with the same flowers that had witnessed James and me finding each other again, that had welcomed Leon into the world. William stood beneath the flower arch, his British reserve melting as Maya walked toward him. Their love love was simpler than ours, unmarked by past lives or ancient promises, but no less real for its newness. During the reception, James pulled me aside. In the quiet corner of our garden, he knelt beside Leon's play area. "I want to adopt her legally," he said. "Alexander's rights transfer made it possible. She's been my daughter in every way that matters. I want to make it official." Tears blurred my vision as I watched our daughter stack blocks with focused determination. "She's always been yours," I whispered, "in both lives." The adoption process moved swiftly, aided by Alexander's previous arrangements. On a sunny morning in the family court, James became Leon's father-in-law as well as love. Maya and William delayed their honeymoon to attend the celebration. We gathered in our garden again, surrounded by lanterns and memories. "I have something for you," Maya said, presenting us with her completed journal. "I've recorded everything. Our past life, the fire, finding each other again, the love that brought us all here." The book was bound in leather, its pages filled with Maya's elegant handwriting. Photos and documents were carefully preserved between the handwritten accounts. The old newspaper article about the fire, Alexander's letter to Leon, wedding photos from both my marriages. "For Leon," Maya explained, "when she's old enough to understand where she comes from, who she comes from." That night, after the celebrations ended and our daughter slept peacefully in her room, James and I sat in the garden. The same lanterns that had once lit our secret meetings now illuminated our family's happiness. "I never dreamed we could have this," James said softly. "In our past life, planning our escape, I thought just being together would be enough. But this, having you both, being Leon's father in every way, it's more than I could have imagined." A message arrived from Singapore. Alexander had seen the adoption announcement. His response was simple but profound. "Now everything is as it should be," he wrote. "The past is healed. The future belongs to love." Maya and William moved into their new home nearby, close enough for daily visits but far enough to build their own life together. She brought the journal with her each time she came, adding new entries as our family grew and changed. Leon flourished under the love of her parents and extended family. She showed an early talent for dance, moving to music with a grace that seemed to echo another time. The dreams of our past life faded gradually, replaced by the vibrant reality of our present. But sometimes, in quiet moments, we would catch glimpses of the love that had started in a secret dance hall and survived through time to find its way home. Alexander's new wife sent photos of their simple life in Singapore. He looked different in them, peaceful in a way he had never been in either of his lives with us. He found his own path to happiness, Maya observed, just like we all did. The adoption certificate arrived in an official envelope. James framed it alongside Leon's birth certificate, two documents that told the legal story of how our family came to be. But the real story, we knew, was written in Maya's journal, in the memories we shared, in the love that had refused to die, even when everything else burned away. William embraced our unique history, accepting the complexity of Pansanda and reborn love with British practicality. He and James formed a close friendship, untainted by the shadows of the past. As summer turned to autumn, we celebrated the Mid-Autumn Festival in our garden. Lanterns swayed in the gentle breeze, her laughter echoing across lifetimes. Maya watched her niece with tears in her eyes. "In our past life, I never got to see you this happy," she said. "I never got to see your child grow up. But you're here now," I replied, squeezing her hand. "We all are, finally where we belong." The night ended with our small family gathered under the stars. Leon fell asleep in James's arms, one hand clutching her jade pendant, the other holding tight to her father's shirt. Looking at them, at the family we had created from love and loss and second chances, I knew we had finally found our way home, not just to each other, but to the happiness we had dreamed of in another lifetime. The lanterns glowed softly in our garden, no longer lighting the way for secret meetings, but celebrating a love that had transcended death itself to create something even more beautiful. A family bound not by blood or obligation, but by choice and devotion, and the kind of love that never truly dies. 5 years passed like pages turning in Maya's journal. Leon grew into a bright, curious child who danced through our garden with the grace of both her lives. Her questions about family began early, noticing the differences between her classmates' simple family trees and her own complex web of love. On her 5th birthday, we gathered in the garden that had witnessed so much of our story. Maya and William had welcomed twins the previous year, a boy and girl who adored their older cousin. Alexander and his wife sent gifts from Singapore, Singapore, where they had built a peaceful life away from old memories. "Mama," Leon asked that evening, touching her jade pendant, "why do we three have matching necklaces?" James and I exchanged glances with Maya. We had known this moment would come, had prepared for it with the help of Maya's carefully kept journal, because we share a very special story, I began, pulling her onto my lap. A story about love that was so strong, it survived through time itself. Over the next hours, we told her a simplified version of our past, about a dance hall and secret meetings, about love that defied social barriers, about an aunt who protected us then as she does now. "And Daddy?" she asked, looking at James with complete trust. "Was he my daddy then too?" "In every way that matters," James replied, gathering her close. "In that life and this one, you were always meant to be our daughter." Maya brought out her journal, showing Leon the carefully preserved newspaper article about the fire, the photos that documented our current life, the letter Alexander had written explaining his choice to let go. "Uncle Alexander gave you to us," Maya explained gently, "because he knew, like we all did, that love is stronger than blood." Leon absorbed everything with remarkable understanding, asking questions that showed wisdom beyond her years. She wanted to know about the dance hall, about the lanterns we still hung in our garden, about the jade pendants that connected us through time. "Sometimes," she said thoughtfully, "when I dance in the garden, I remember music I've never heard." "Is that from before?" James lifted her into his arms, swaying gently to invisible music. "Some memories are too strong to forget, even across lifetimes." That night, after Leon had fallen asleep surrounded by her birthday gifts, we received an unexpected email from Alexander. His wife had given birth to their first child, a son. "We named him William," he wrote, "after Maya's husband, who showed me that letting go of the past doesn't mean losing yourself. Someday, I'll tell him about his sister in Shanghai, about how sometimes the greatest love is knowing when to step aside." Maya added the birth announcement to her journal, another thread in the tapestry of our interconnected lives. William and the twins celebrated with us, our modern family complete and thriving. As years passed, Leon's questions grew more sophisticated. She asked about the fire, about Alexander's role in both lives, about how souls find each other across time. We answered honestly, guided by Maya's detailed records and our own memories. Leon learned about her father's sacrifice in our past life, about Alexander's journey from anger to acceptance, about the love that had given her two fathers in different ways. On her 7th birthday, Alexander sent a video message along with his usual gifts. He looked older, more settled, at peace with the choices that had brought us all to where we belonged. "Happy birthday, Leon," he said warmly. "Know that you are loved by many, in many ways. Your parents have given you something I never could, a love that transcends time itself." Leon watched the message with quiet understanding, then hugged James tightly. "I'm glad you're my daddy," she whispered. "In both lives." Our garden continued to bloom, marking seasons and celebrations. Maya's twins took their first steps there. William learned to appreciate Chinese traditions there that seemed to echo from another time. The dreams of our past life faded to gentle memories, like well-loved photographs stored safely away. But the love that had survived fire and death and rebirth grew stronger each day, expressed in Leon's laughter, in family gatherings, in the quiet moments of ordinary happiness. 10 years after that fateful mid-autumn festival when our daughter was born, we gathered again in our garden. Alexander and his family flew in from Singapore, meeting Leon in person for the first time since she was a baby. There was no awkwardness, no tension. His son played with Maya's twins while Leon showed him her dance routines. His wife, an artist who understood the power of stories, sketched the scene in her notebook. "She's perfect," Alexander said, watching Leon dance, "exactly as she should be. Thank you for giving her the life I couldn't." As lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, 4 generations of jade pendants caught the light. Mine, Maya's, Leon's, and now one for each of Maya's twins. Not symbols of secret love anymore, but connections across time and choice and change. James found me later, after our guests had gone and Leon was asleep, in the quiet garden where our story had found its happiness. He took my hand. "Do you ever wonder," he asked softly, "if we'll find each other again in the next life?" I looked at our home, at the lanterns that had guided us through 2 lifetimes, at the peaceful face of our daughter visible through her window. I replied, that some loves are eternal. But right now, in this life, we have everything we dreamed of then. We have our family, our peace, our second chance at happiness. The garden glowed with soft light, lanterns swaying like stars brought down to earth. Inside, Our daughter slept peacefully, surrounded by the love of two fathers, an aunt who had protected her across lifetimes, and a mother who had found her way home through time itself. Maya's journal sat on the shelf, its pages full, but not finished. Tomorrow would bring new stories, new moments to record, new chapters in a love that had proven stronger than death. Our garden bloomed in every season now, no longer a place of secret meetings, but a home where love grew freely. The lanterns lit our way not through darkness, but into light, guiding us not to escape, but to belong. This was what we had dreamed of in that long-ago dance hall. Not just love, but family. Not just passion, but peace. Not just a moment of happiness, but a lifetime of joy passed down through generations. Looking at James in the lantern light, I saw both the man who had died, saving others, and the father who lived loving our child. In his eyes, I saw our past, our present, and a future that would continue long after us through the lives we had touched, and the love we had proven could survive anything, even fire, even death, even time itself.